let's get pictures of some of the pastors and their families.
Yes, we have. I have some pictures here. Of course, this is Pastor Maggio Lee and his wife, Angela. Again, he pastors one of the churches that we planted, but he also is transitioning into an executive director position where he is basically doing in Brazil for Ministério Pão Vivo what I do here. He's building partnerships. He's getting into churches. He's sharing the ministry. He's mentoring these church planners. He's teaching and equipping them and just doing the day-to-day work of the ministry.
And he'll be a full-time employee.
He is a full-time church planner and leader of this Brazilian organization.
Looks like Zorro.
He does look like Zorro. Even more so when he was younger. But this is Pastor Lindomar and his family. Again, we're working in the slums, for the most part, these pastors are coming out of the communities that they're reaching. So very, very humble, very simple people. This is his wife, Marilu, and their children. He's one of our church planners. He is on staff of this Brazilian organization. This is Pastor Ubitatan and his wife, Clyde, and they have a son also. They are planning one of our more recent church plants. And again, on staff, he's a church planner for Ministério Pão Vivo. This is Pastor Artino and his wife. He's our newest church planner. He is in the city of Torres that I showed you on the map. Great couple, young, don't have a lot of experience, but they've moved to this city. They're away from their family and in a new area, pouring out their lives for these people. They moved in on February 1st. By February 30, a 2 in-home Bible study set up that he was doing. They found a couple elderly widows that didn't have food, and they began ministering to them and helping them. Their son here is adopted. His mother was an AIDS-infected prostitute, drug addict. She died of AIDS, and he's HIV positive. And this young couple, the boy needed a home. He was an orphan, and they took him in and adopted him and took responsibility for him. And again, called people of God, willing to pour out their lives for the poor. And our job is to come alongside them and to help them to answer the call that God's placed on their lives.
Okay, so with that, you've got 8 churches in 3 cities, and most of these church planners are from the slums. They're from the communities that they're ministering to. Mm-hmm. The desire is there to train them, give them education, theological education. So let me read you a passage of Scripture. I don't want to set you up and then drop the hammer. Let me be up front. 1 Timothy 3, Titus as well, but 1 Timothy 3 is what it says. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, pastor, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be, and it lists qualifications, and here they are for everybody's, so we're on the same page. Above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, must be able to manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for the church, God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he'll be puffed up with conceit, fall into condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he might not fall into disgrace and into the snare of the devil. So, is that are those things that you require of the pastors that you're looking for? Or is this someone, hey, I'd love to be a pastor. Okay, well, we need a church here. You can be a pastor. And with that, when you do have men of God called, and they do find themselves in difficult places, and this wouldn't be a unique issue to Brazilian pastors in the slums, but how do you deal with them? What's the process? What accountability do you have in dealing with pastors who might find themselves in difficult times?
Okay. The first part of that, absolutely. Those criteria, that's the biblical standard. That is what a pastor is called to be. It's what we're all called to be, but pastors specifically. And so that's absolutely essential to us. It's not, hey, this guy's willing to work in a slum, so we finally found somebody that wants to go to these places, so let's send him. Again, it's finding called men of God who meet the qualifications, who are willing to go and pour out their lives for a community. And right now, because we're small and we're relatively young, most of our pastors are coming to us through Pastor Maggio Lee's existing network of pastors and friends. And so basically, the pastors that we have, they have been referred to us from a church, from a pastor that we know and trust, who has been discipling them and equipping them. Ultimately, our goal is, as we plant more churches and our churches become more established, that God would raise up from the very slums that we're in men of God that will go and plant churches in other places. Really, right now, the two major difficulties that we have for growth, probably the same difficulties every ministry has, is money, having the resources to do the work, but two, having qualified men that are called and desire to go into the slums and do church ministry. So very much the requirements, the biblical requirements for being a pastor are important and essential in our process of evaluating people and determining their call and their capacity to take on the role of a church planner.
So I do think that's important to really highlight, underline that it's not a means to an end. We need a church. Here's a guy who just wants to be a pastor, and so we'll just make him a pastor, and if he works out, great, and if he doesn't, who cares?
Right.
I do think that's really important to understand that, and I say even, but even in this context, that's something that is held very high.
Absolutely.
Where there may not be a plethora of qualified men, there are not seminaries on every corner, or people who want to go into those type of neighborhoods.
Right.
So when there is a difficulty, and there has been recently difficulty with a pastor of one of the churches, a man that I know that you and your family have grown to love, the board of directors, just great man. And how do you deal with someone when they do find themselves falling into sin, dealing with hardships, ministry, family? What does that look like? What is the support system there for them in Brazil?
Okay. Jason spoke of it. We have had probably our first major setback in ministry since we've been working. Not one of the pastors that I showed you on the list, and if you've been to Brazil and you've met the pastors, you've probably noticed that there's one missing. One of our pastors recently, his background, again, we're working with people that are coming out of the slums, that are coming out of poverty. They have baggage, middle-class people have baggage, and pastors fall sometimes. And we had a pastor recently who had spent his younger years as a homeless drug addict and came to know the Lord, just served the Lord for years. We called him. He planted a church, did a great job. God's working. Developed stomach ulcers and went to the doctor and it was a pride issue, was too prideful to tell the doctor that he had been addicted to narcotics, and the doctor prescribed him painkillers, pain medicine. And within a matter of a couple of months, he was back shooting up cocaine. He handled it the right way. He immediately went to the leadership, Pastor Maggio Lee, and confessed what he had done, what he was doing, and confessed that he had a problem. He didn't misappropriate any funds. We have checks and balances in place that assure that. But he fell, and what transpired was a discussion between myself and Barbara and the leadership here and the leadership in Brazil, and we walked through how to handle this. And ultimately, the long story short,
and I do think this is really want. I I don't ask that to highlight this pastor falling, but rather the process, the accountability, the stewardship of these pastors as living bread here, and Pastor Maggio Lee there in Brazil deal with them, the care they're dealt with. I think, for me, that's really important to know that that's in place. This isn't a, hey, go do your job, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't,
Right.
too bad.
Yeah, and so that's exactly right. And so what happened, Pastor Maggio Lee intervened. We immediately took this pastor out of the church. We got him into an evangelical drug rehab facility. We protected his reputation. We didn't make a big scene about it. We quietly took him out and got him into this rehab facility. He spent a couple of months there. In hindsight, we realized it probably was not long enough. But he spent a couple of months there working with them. We put accountability in place for him so that when he came out, there would be not only accountability with Pastor Maggio Lee, but peer accountability with one of the other church planners. And he came out, but he simply wasn't ready, and he fell again. And so we had to remove him as the pastor of the church. Now we love him. And we've gotten him back into the rehab. We have done what we could to see to it that his family was taken care of. And our hope is that the Spirit will do a great work, and he will be cleaned and healed and set free from the bondage of addiction. And will he ever be a pastor again? I don't know. Restoration is the work of the Holy Spirit. But we haven't abandoned him. We're working in slums with people that have drug addictions and problems, and they fall. And now is an opportunity for us with one of our own to show them that what we've been preaching, we believe and we practice. And so we're in the midst of working all that out and seeing exactly what that means. But again, he's not pastoring. He won't be pastoring in the near future. But we want to continue to love his family and help them and do what we can to see that they are taken care of and that they're not left on the street.